It was just another sunny Saturday afternoon in our quiet suburban neighborhood. My wife had stepped out for a quick walk around the block, nothing unusual, just part of her weekend routine. But what she didn't expect was to be cornered halfway. Down the street by a group of HOA enforcers standing there like they were on some kind of mission. They weren't just asking questions, they were aggressive, demanding answers about something as trivial as a garden decoration and a flagweed. Put up days earlier, she tried to explain calmly and respectfully, but they weren't interested in listening. From what she later told me, it felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. What they didn't know, what they never expected, was who she was married to. See, I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I've spent years navigating real threats, leading operations, and defending freedom. And now, some overzealous HOA officials think they can intimidate my wife over a flower pot and a flag. I was inside the house when she called me, her voice shaky but firm. "You need to come outside," she said. The moment I stepped out that door and saw how they were surrounding her, arms crossed, voices raised, it was like a switch flipped in my head. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. But I walked up calmly, stood next to her, and asked one question that shifted the entire tone. "Is there a problem here?" They didn't recognize me at first. To them, I was just another homeowner. But they were about to find out who they were really dealing with. What came next wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't violence. It was a lesson in presence, discipline, and respect. And that's when everything started to unravel, right? In front of them, the tallest guy in the group looked like he had something to prove, stepped forward like he was in charge. He glanced at me, then at my wife, and muttered something about violations and non-compliance. His tone was sharp, like he was trying to intimidate us with HOA buzzwords. I didn't flinch. I just looked him in the eye, calm as ever, and asked him to show me where exactly in the guidelines it said a patriotic flag and a couple of solar lights were an issue. He hesitated. No one had probably ever asked him that before now. I've dealt with pressure. Most people can't even imagine missions overseas, high-stakes decisions, life-or-death moments. So a handful of self-important HOA board members with printed clipboards wasn't going to rattle me. But what did get under my skin was the way they treated my wife. Like she didn't deserve basic respect. Like they thought they could gang up on her just because she was alone. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of people I was dealing with as we stood there. I noticed a few neighbors peeking from their windows, others pausing their walks to see what was going on. The HOA enforcers seemed to realize they were starting to attract attention, but instead of backing off, they doubled down. The one in front began flipping through his papers like he was preparing for a courtroom battle. He even mentioned fines. Fines for something no one had ever complained about before. That's when I started connecting the dots. This wasn't just about a flag or a garden ornament. Something deeper was going on. Maybe a grudge, maybe a power trip. Either way, I knew. One thing, they picked the wrong family to push around. And what I was about to uncover next, it would turn everything upside down. The guy in charge, who finally introduced himself as Mr. Daniels from the HOA Compliance Committee, said our American flag didn't meet community aesthetic standards. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I looked around. Plenty of houses had seasonal wreaths, solar lights, even sports team flags. But none of those homeowners were being harassed. My gut told me this wasn't about policy, was personal. Later, that evening, after things cooled down a bit, my wife told me about a run-in she had at a recent HOA meeting. She had asked a simple question about how funds were being spent specifically, why our monthly dues had quietly increased, and where the extra money was going. According to her, the board didn't take too kindly to being questioned, especially not by someone who actually reads the fine print. That's when it hit me, this wasn't random. They were targeting her to send a message. I started digging. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and compared them to the supposed violations they handed. Thus, nothing added up. The solar lights were listed as permitted, and the flag, especially the national flag, was protected under both state and federal guidelines. They were bluffing, relying on fear and confusion to push people into submission. But they hadn't. Counted on someone like me. Meanwhile, neighbors started quietly reaching out. One woman said her daughter wasn't allowed to hang a graduation banner last spring. Another couple mentioned they were fined for a small vegetable garden in their backyard. Turns out, we weren't the only ones. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. Selective enforcement, power trips, and intimidation masked as regulation. But why? What was really going on behind those closed HOA boardroom doors? The more I uncovered, the more twisted it all started to seem. And I knew. We were only scratching the surface. As the days passed, the pressure from the HOA only got worse. We started receiving warning letters almost daily, each one more aggressive than the last. They threatened fines, legal action, even hinted at possible liens on our property if we didn't comply. But comply with what? Every so-called violation was either exaggerated or completely made up. It was clear they were trying to break us down, hoping we'd cave just to get some peace. But I wasn't built that way. I spent most of my adult life navigating chaos, leading men through the unknown, and staying focused under fire. These HOA board members had no idea who they were pushing. Still, I didn't want a fee tie, wanted the truth, and the deeper I looked, the more layers started to peel back. One night, I got a message from a former HOA treasurer, an older gentleman who had moved to Florida last year. He had watched some of what was going on through local Facebook groups and decided to reach out. What he told me confirmed my suspicions. There had been irregularities in the HOA's financial reports for over a year, missing funds, inflated invoices, and vendors that didn't seem to exist. But whenever someone asked too many questions, they were either silenced or targeted, just like us, and then came the breaking point. One evening, we came home to find a notice taped to our front door of formal citation, claiming we were in willful defiance of community standards and would face a disciplinary hearing. It was scheduled to happen in just 3 days, behind closed doors with no clear way to defend ourselves. They were trying to corner us, force us into submission. But what they didn't expect was that I'd been quietly preparing for this moment. Gathering evidence, recording conversations, talking to neighbors. And what I had uncovered by then was bigger than anyone in this community was ready for. Something was about to go down, and the HOA had no idea what was coming. The night before the disciplinary hearing, I sat at the kitchen table with a folder full of everything I had collected, emails from concerned neighbors, photos of other homes with similar decorations that had never been cited, receipts from phantom vendors, and even a copy of the HOA bylaws with entire sections mysteriously blacked out in the public version. My wife sat across from me, quiet but firm, finally feeling like maybe we weren't alone in this. But then came the twist we never saw coming. Around 10:30 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not frantic, just a slow, steady knock. I opened it to find a young man in his early 20s, nervously looking around before he spoke. "You don't know me," he said, "but my dad's on the HOA board. I think you need to see this." He handed me a USB drive and took off without saying another word. I plugged it into my laptop and immediately saw a folder labeled Internal Only. Inside were screenshots of private group messages between board members. What they were saying behind closed doors wasn't just petty, it was strategic. Target lists, notes on who to pressure next, even instructions on how to write vague citations that couldn't be legally challenged. And at the top of that list, my wife's name, highlighted, underlined. That's when the full picture came into view. This wasn't just a group of volunteers managing community standards. This was coordinated, intentional, and someone higher up was pulling the strings, using the HOA as a cover. The power plays, the selective enforcement, the financial red flags, they were all connected. And whatever was happening, it went beyond flowers, flags, or garden lights. Now, the hearing just hours away, we weren't walking in to defend ourselves, we were walking into something far bigger. And if we weren't careful, we might not be the only ones they tried to silence. The next morning, we arrived at the HOA clubhouse for the so-called disciplinary hearing. The room was small, dimly lit, and already packed with the full board sitting at a long table like they were ready to hand down a sentence. No neighbors were allowed in, no witnesses, just us and them. They motioned for us to sit across from them, all serious and rehearsed, like they'd done this many times before. Mr. Daniels opened with a prepared statement, filled with technical terms and a condescending tone. He listed our infractions like he was reading off a grocery list, not once looking up. Then he calmly said we'd be fined, and if we didn't comply, further legal steps would be taken. My wife sat still, calm but tight-jawed. And when he asked if we had anything to say in our defense, I leaned forward, pulled out a small portable speaker, and hit play. The room went silent. What followed were audio clips I'd recorded from earlier. Encounters board members mocking homeowners, talking about how easy it was to make examples out of people who didn't follow quietly. Then I dropped the printed screenshots from that USB drive right onto the table. Their private messages, their target lists, even instructions on how to falsify citations without triggering legal consequences. The color drained from Daniel's face before anyone could speak. I told them I'd already sent everything to a local investigative reporter and the state HOA regulatory board. I wasn't here for revenge, was here for accountability. And just then, the door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, not for us, but with a warrant for financial documents tied to the HOA's vendor payments. It felt like justice. But then right as we were leaving, the unexpected twist landed. A quiet woman at the back of the room stood and walked toward me. She introduced herself as the daughter of the HOA's original founder. "You haven't seen the worst of it yet," she said, handing me an envelope. "This goes all the way to the developer." And just like that, I realized the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Investigators dug through HOA records, and sure enough, the envelope that woman gave me led to even deeper fraud kickbacks, fake contractor deals, and pressure from the original property developer to quietly push out longtime residents who challenged authority. Was all part of a bigger plan to revitalize the neighborhood by replacing homeowners with short-term renters and pocketing profits from behind the scenes. That scheme collapsed quickly once the press got hold of it. Several board members resigned, including Daniels. Others faced legal trouble. And as for my wife and I, we were cleared of all supposed violations. The flags, the lights, everything they had once pointed to suddenly. No one seemed to care. In fact, many neighbors started putting their own flags and decorations out again. Like reclaiming something they hadn't realized was slowly taken from them. But what mattered most wasn't the exposure, it was the shift in people. Neighbors started talking again, looking out for one another. A few of us even organized a town hall and elected a brand new HOA board made up of folks who actually wanted to help the community, not control it. For me, this whole ordeal wasn't about garden lights or power struggles. It was about standing up when it would have been easier to back down, about protecting my family, and proving that sometimes the biggest fights happen not overseas, but right in your own backyard. So if you're dealing with HOA drama or feel like someone's trying to push you around, know this: you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be violent to take a stand. Just stay grounded, stay calm, and never forget who you are, because sometimes That's all it takes to change everything.